So, I've got to tell you about the time I came home from what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation and found my house, well, let's just say it looked like it survived a tornado. Seriously, I stood in the doorway, suitcase in one hand, keys in the other, blinking at this chaos like, is this some kind of elaborate prank? I'd left my cozy little place all tidy and spotless, the kind of place where you'd want to curl up with a book and forget the world for a bit. Instead, there were empty beer cans littering the kitchen counter, party cups spilled on the floor, and, oh, this is the kicker, the living room couch had been flipped upside down. You know, the way you'd see in those movies where the house gets wrecked by, I don't know, wild teenagers or something? But this was me, in my own home, back from a quiet trip to the beach. And here's where it gets even weirder, I hadn't even been living there. I had rented out my place on Airbnb while I was gone, mostly to cover the bills and keep the space lively. I thought I was doing a smart thing, hosting friendly travelers, you know? Yeah, apparently so did someone else, a guest named Mark. The minute I stepped inside, my mind was racing. How the heck did I end up responsible for cleaning up this disaster I never caused? I mean, I wasn't there, I didn't throw the party, and yet here I was, staring down the aftermath, wondering if I was on some hidden camera show. And oh, the smell. Let's just say it was a mix of stale beer, something burnt, and some mystery odor that I'm pretty sure has no place anywhere in a house. I pinched my nose and shuffled further in, eyes still wide. The walls, usually painted a calm beige, somehow looked grimier under the dull light. And on the coffee table, confetti. Confetti. Who brings confetti to a weekend stay? From the doorway, I called out, half expecting someone to jump out laughing. But the house was silent except for the faint buzzing of my phone, which I was about to check for any messages from this Mark guy. What I found there only raised more questions. No apologies, no oops, we're sorry, just a couple of vague messages like, it was a fun night, thanks for letting us stay, and hope the place was okay. Okay? That's it? I sank onto the now questionable couch trying to process all this. There had to be some mistake, right? But as I looked around, slowly piecing together what went down here, I realized this was going to be way messier than I thought. And honestly, a tiny voice in my head whispered, this is just the beginning. So, a bit about me before this whole mess with Mark started. I'm not one of those people who hosts an Airbnb because they want to become this grand entrepreneur or anything. Honestly, I took it up sort of on a whim a couple years ago when I realized my little suburban home sat empty most of the time while I traveled for work. Rent, mortgage, bills, they're not going to pay themselves. I figured, why not let someone crash here for a bit and help cover some of those costs? Plus, I'm kind of a people person, so the chance to meet new folks was just the cherry on top. My place is cozy, nothing fancy, but neat and inviting. I always take pride in how it looks, making sure everything is clean and organized before any guest arrives. I even made a little welcome notebook with quirks about the house, like how the shower's temperamental or that the slow cooker lives in the back cabinet. I wanted guests to feel like they were checking into a friend's place, not some anonymous rental. Then there was Mark. He came along one random Thursday afternoon, booking the weekend. From the get-go, he seemed, well, normal enough. His profile showed he was in his early 30s, some IT consultant type, with decent reviews that even mentioned he left the last place spotless. Key on the messages? Courteous, straightforward. Looking forward to a quiet weekend, he wrote. That's what I like to hear. When Mark arrived, I actually met him for a quick handoff. He seemed polite, even joked about being a light sleeper because of his tiny dog who snores. I handed over the keys, showed him around, and before I knew it, he was settling in just fine, making himself at home. I left a spare bottle of wine on the kitchen counter, my little housewarming tradition, and told him to reach out if he needed anything. Now, here's where things get a little off. At first, his behavior was exactly as promised, quiet, respectful, neat. I had to run a few errands that afternoon and evening, and he sent me a couple messages saying everything was great. The slow cooker survived its first test, if you will, but then, somewhere between Friday evening and Saturday afternoon, the messages that came in changed tone just a bit. Not overtly strange, but enough to give me pause. One was an oddly ambiguous, "Thanks for letting me use the place," which sounded fine but felt a little less warm than I expected. Another message later didn't address me directly but mentioned, "Friends stopping by," which surprised me. I hadn't approved any extra guests for this booking, but I figured maybe Mark had forgotten to tell me or had something casual planned. Still, I didn't want to be that host who micromanages every move. I pride myself on trusting my guests. It's part of the Airbnb community spirit, right? So I gave him the benefit of the doubt, imagining polite board games or a quiet movie night with a friend. But the quirks of my home soon became part of a slippery slope. You see, I've got some little idiosyncrasies about the house. Like the front door's lock is a bit finicky, and if you push the kitchen cabinet just right, it creaks loudly. And guess who managed to lock the door behind him one night in such a way that Mrs. Jensen, my next-door neighbor, had to intervene because she got locked out? Yep, Mark. Mrs. Jensen. Bless her heart, she's like the unofficial mayor of this block and the unofficial guardian angel of my Airbnb. When I first started hosting, I was half worried she'd disapprove, but she's actually been quite supportive, which was a relief. Anyway, when Mark's lockout incident happened, Mrs. Jensen marched over and gave me a very pointed look paired with a whispered, "You need to keep an eye on this one." Of course, I told her I'd check in with Mark and see if everything was okay. That same evening, things began to tip even further. I got a message from Mrs. Jensen herself, written in her signature dry tone. "Do you know your guest has had quite the gathering? I just counted 10 extra cars in the driveway." Her message arrived just as I was scrolling through Mark's latest note. A brief, "Thanks for the place" text. I did a double take. 10 cars? For a quiet weekend? Suddenly, the trust I put in Mark felt a bit misplaced. I tried to reach out, casual and polite. "Hey Mark, I got a note from Mrs. Jensen about some extra visitors. Can you fill me in?" The reply, "Oh yeah, some friends popped over, all good here." "All good," he said. I blinked at the screen. That was the point where the anxiety started bubbling beneath the surface. Was I missing something? Had I messed up by giving him full access without ground rules about guests? See, I'd handed over the keys to my home with a mental checklist running through my head, trusting the little red book I left on my kitchen counter to guide guests along. There were no wild parties allowed, no loud noises after 10 p.m. And please, for the love of caffeine, don't rearrange the furniture. I felt responsible. After all, this was my haven that I invited strangers into. By Sunday afternoon, I still hadn't heard much from Mark beyond those vague messages. But then, Mrs. Poffable. Jensen stopped me in the street, eyes squinting with a mix of concern and something else. Disapproval, maybe? "You might want to check your living room before you get your hopes up," she said, nodding towards my house. My stomach dropped. I'd been envisioning a few polite visitors, maybe some harmless fun. But that look on her face said more than words ever could. And then there was the question gnawing at me like a curious cat knocking over fragile things. What was going on behind the door when I wasn't there? What was Mark really up to? I'd thought I knew, but now all those little red flags I'd ignored were starting to look like flashing neon signs. So, with a deep breath, I decided I'd find out firsthand. Because whatever Mark's version was, there was clearly a story I hadn't been told. And I had a sinking feeling it probably wasn't the one I wanted to hear. The first time I noticed something was wrong wasn't exactly a got a bad feeling moment. It was more like, a sudden punch in the face disguised as a loud crash echoing from the living room late Friday night. I was out grabbing some groceries and my phone buzzed with an alert from the neighbor, Mrs. Jensen. She's sweet but a little, let's say, straightforward when it comes to my Airbnb adventures. That evening, her message was short and sharp. "Do you hear what's going on next door? Sounds like a herd of elephants is rehearsing for a concert." I frowned, a bit embarrassed. I mean, I know every old house groans and creaks, but elephants? Overdramatic or no, it was enough to make me pause. I shot Mark a quick text, something casual like, "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay over there? Heard some pretty loud noises." His reply was a masterclass in minimalism. "All good." All good? All good doesn't normally accompany 10 or so cars parked in the driveway, boisterous late-night stomping, and that strange new smell wafting from my vents. Yep, the first whiff hit me Saturday morning when I popped in to grab some things. It was like someone had combined burnt popcorn, spilled beer, and, I swear, something vaguely like old socks marinating in vinegar. Still trying to stay calm, I texted again, "Mark, could you please check the place?" Mrs. Jensen mentioned some noise and visitors. His reply was blisteringly vague, "Just some friends hanging out. Nothing to worry about." Nothing to worry about is, of course, the exact phrase that made me worry the most. I had this sinking feeling that friends hanging out was a euphemism for something less innocent. That afternoon, when I decided to take a peek inside, after all, this was my home, the front door creaked open a little too easily. The lock, usually stubborn, seemed to have been tampered with. And stepping inside, my heart sank. The living room looked like a cyclone had gone on a mission of destruction targeting my sanity. The once neat couch had been dragged into a corner, cushions shredded and tossed onto the floor like confetti after some kind of bizarre festival. A lamp was knocked over, its shade dangling sadly, bent at a sad angle. And there, smack in the middle of the beige carpet, was the stain. Not your everyday spill, but this angry, dark blotch that looked like it might be plotting world domination. I poked at it gingerly with the tip of my shoe. Ew! I took a deep breath and snapped a few photos for Airbnb support, hoping that documenting might jumpstart some accountability. Of course, coordinating with Airbnb was like running in quicksand wearing roller skates. Their initial responses were polite, but painfully slow and generic. "We're sorry for the inconvenience, we're looking into it." Meanwhile, I was juggling my irritation and a growing suspicion that Mark was not exactly owning up to what had happened. Throughout it all, Mark's messages felt like thin veils trying to hide a mess way bigger than he was willing to admit. When I finally confronted him with the photos of the mess, His explanation was so bizarre it almost made me laugh, if I weren't so frustrated. He texted me back. Yeah, some furniture got a bit messed up because my dog threw a tantrum. Also, the stain? It's from an unfortunate barbecue mishap inside. It was just me and a few friends grilling, indoors. Sorry. Indoors? Barbecue? Tantrum? Say what now? I blinked at the screen. Who grills indoors? And since when did dogs throw tantrums that resulted in furniture casualties? The more he explained, the more surreal the story became. Like I'd stepped into an episode of a sitcom I'd never signed up to star in. Meanwhile, Mrs. Big Jensen kept dropping subtle but increasingly panic-laced hints whenever we crossed paths. I swear, I heard glass breaking, she whispered one afternoon, eyeing me like I was holding the remote control for this chaos. She even offered to help me check the house after Mark left, which was generous but kind of sad. I don't know, it felt like my trust was unraveling faster than I could stitch it back together. Every attempt to get concrete answers from Mark felt like trying to nail jelly to a wall. I was stuck in this weird limbo, trying not to lose my cool or my deposit, dealing with Airbnb's slow-moving bureaucracy, and feeling my own patience snap a little bit more with every update. And then, just when I thought I'd heard it all, Mark sent one last message before checking out. It was a weird mix of nonchalance and what I can only describe as a cryptic shrug, hope the place wasn't too disappointing. Sometimes things get a little wild, right? Thanks for the stay. Wild? No one told me this was the Wild West, or that I was running a rodeo in my own living room. So here I was, left staring at the broken furniture, the mysterious stains, and a house that definitely wasn't the cozy sanctuary I left behind. And honestly, I was more confused than ever. How did a quiet IT consultant with a snoring dog turn my home into a questionable party zone? And more importantly, what was I going to do next? Getting that compensation from Airbnb finally felt like a small victory, like I'd climbed a steep hill and found a water bottle waiting at the top. After weeks of back and forth, submitting photos, detailed reports, and a fair bit of polite nagging, Airbnb agreed to cover some of the damages. It wasn't the full amount I hoped for. Let's just say that stubborn stain on the carpet had settled in like an unwanted roommate, but enough to help with repairs and replacements. But truth be told, some damage was permanent. The scar on the carpet, the creaky front door lock that never quite recovered, and honestly, the lingering feeling that my sanctuary had been invaded in a way I hadn't imagined. Those things don't just fix themselves, no matter how many claims or apologies you get. What really surprised me, though, was Mrs. Jensen's unexpected gesture. One afternoon, not long after Mark's chaotic weekend, she knocked on my door holding a box of cleaning supplies and a stern look that somehow conveyed both sympathy and sheer determination. I've been through my own battles with troublesome renters, she said, winking like we were partners in some secret neighborhood resistance. Thought you might need a hand fixing up the place. Her help was a game changer. Between her old-school elbow grease and some serious advice on home security upgrades, Mrs. Jensen helped me reclaim my space and maybe a little bit of my sanity. It was a reminder that even when things feel out of control, a good neighbor can be the best kind of unexpected hero. This whole experience was a crash course in trust, boundaries, and the wild world of Airbnb hosting. I realized that trusting a stranger with your home isn't just about handing over keys. It's about setting clear rules, knowing when to speak up, and accepting that sometimes even your best intentions don't stop chaos from knocking on the door. I'm still on the fence about continuing to host. On one hand, I love meeting new people and hearing their stories. On the other, the thought of returning home to another Mark's is enough to make me want to lock the doors for good. So, for now, I'm taking a break, fixing up the house, and maybe reevaluating what quiet weekend really means. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that cleaning up after a guest from hell is definitely not part of the hosting dream. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Maybe. We'll see.